Alright, so in this video, I'm going to talk about this whole free speech thing issue. But before that, this may be the next to last time that you guys are going to be seeing this room, at least for a while. Not forever, but for a while, because I'm moving to California. Yay! California, the land of censorship. Yeah, no, I'm excited. But yeah, I need to talk about this whole free speech thing. So, a lot of people have already gotten into this. They've made more or less all the arguments that I would have made, and the right solution, I think, is already there. If you're curious, I think the right answer would be to take all of the social medias and regulate them as public utilities. Like, treating them as public utilities is the most sensible thing to me, or introducing an Internet Bill of Rights, or something on that level, because you need something within that framework to actually deal with the problem. But that's not really what I'm going to do, because I'm going to get into like the theoretical specifics of this kind of problem, which I find it so incredible how many like normal ass people that I know in real life have just been on the wrong side of each of these issues, so blatantly on the wrong side. Let me just say, I didn't agree with the Alex Jones ban from any of the sites, Twitter, whatever it is. I didn't agree with any of these right-wing people getting fired for things they tweeted. That's just like not the purpose of Twitter. If you ask me, Twitter is banal nonsense sharing. It's you type random shit in the and tweet it. It's not like, it's the opposite of what should be taken seriously. The most serious thing you could do on Twitter is link someone to a video where you get into something serious. You can't actually get into you can be serious, but you can't get in whatever. The point is, it's like antithetical to the purpose of Twitter. There's been hypocrisy from all these sites. Like, people have been banned for things that other people, for doing things less bad than other people did, and those people weren't banned. Like the New York Times woman. It's a shit show. The whole thing is a shit show. I'm sure many of you have probably know the kinds of things I'm talking about. If you're following anybody else on YouTube that talks about politics, you know what I mean. So it's been pretty rough, and I realize I'm pretty late to the ball, but that's how it is with me. The problem is, it's not like the hypocrisy so much as there's no there's no reasonable way to execute these kinds of bans and decisions from up top, or using those algorithms that they have at it's untenable, and it isn't fair. I don't think any of the people the people who've had reprehensible views that got banned, none of them were bad enough to get banned, in my opinion. Actually, no, that's not an opinion. In actuality, I'd say there's no there were repercussions that you could have towards those people that would have befitted the crime, but the ones that happened did not befit the crime. Losing your job is a pretty rough punishment. It's a pretty rough punishment, and it doesn't make sense for someone calling someone a monkey. It just doesn't make sense. It's not bad enough. That act is not inherently bad enough to merit that kind of reaction. In the Alex Jones situation, the legal system was already taking that into account. I'm sure you've heard the arguments, and I know certain left-wing people don't want to hear it, but honest to God, how many left-wing people have been banned since then? Also, for making jokes. It affects both sides. I don't know why you'd think it doesn't. So yeah, that's just that's just a little bit of me scoffing at this whole thing, because it's honestly frustrating. Going forward, so I'm gonna get into complexity again, but the situation here from like the BLR perspective that I want to champion is that free speech is a tool that could be used wrong, but it could also be used right. And the thing is, it's not a matter of banning it if it's used wrong. Like, it's a tool we fundamentally have to rely on. You know, I'm not a fundamental rights theorist. You know, I don't think rights are the inherent absolute pillar of ethics. I don't think that they're the inherent truth of what we need to uphold, and that's all that really matters. No, rights are tools, and they should be seen as tools. And the thing about free speech is that it's a pretty fucking important tool. I mean, you almost can't do anything without it, not at a philosophical level. You basically have to assume that that right exists in order to get anything done, philosophically, that is. You need to have the discussion in order to turn the discussion into action. One of the problems that the pro-free speech crowd have is that they champion free speech, but they don't champion anything on top of free speech. Like, I've seen Dave Rubin do this. I've seen him talk about how great free speech is, but free speech without action is just noise. Noise doesn't matter. Okay? And yeah, free speech as a means to do bad action, manipulate and you know, poison the well and do whatever it is that the Nazis did, yeah, that's also a problem. At that point, the free speech is actually incredibly superficial. But you see, in that case, what's going to happen is that the people who are doing that would also be in favor of censoring it as well, right? Secretly, whether they admit it or not. And you have to be, you know, on the lookout for that. The whole paradox of tolerance defense of this is also, like, incredibly shallow. I mean, you don't have to be perfectly tolerant towards the intolerant, but you do have to be more tolerant than they are. Because if you're as intolerant of them as they are of whatever group you sympathize with, then you're just as bad. Because basically, there's a more grounded theoretical argument to make there, but the reason you have to be more tolerant than they are is because you have to be more fair than they are, right? You have to be better people. You have to be better than they are. You have to be slightly better. I'm not saying you have to be way better and let them walk all over you and be intolerant, but you have to be a little bit better than they are. At least a little bit. You have to give them a window to improve themselves if they wish. Because if you're just as bad, then there's no way to actually get out of that sort of, you know, get out of that sort of, like, you know, vice grip lock situation where both sides have their guns pointed at each other, right? There's no way to diffuse that, right? There's no way for things to just meld. If you are hell-bent on being as intolerant as they are, you can't. You have to be more tolerant, and you be slightly more tolerant. Doesn't mean you have to be as tolerant, you know, you don't have to be as tolerant of them as, you know, as you are of people who don't do anything wrong. No, obviously no. You don't have to be perfectly tolerant, but you can't be perfectly intolerant. There's a happy medium in there. What do you mean? A balance. You need that balance. It's absolutely vital. Because, I mean, if you throw that away, you will end up limiting the system into something that's not going to turn out too well, right? You know, I've heard, so people, when there's something at stake, people aren't likely to be, like, ultra tolerant of the side that's threatening that. But you have to be more tolerant. Again, you have to be more open than they would be in your position. Slightly more open. And that's how you know you're in the right, by the way, is that you're slightly more open. You know, that's how you know you're in the right. That's how you know you're being more fair and accepting, anyway. You know, that whole thing goes into question as soon as you become as intolerant as the opposing side. Ugh. But that's just a small point, I'd say. You know, there's ideas that I despise. There's plenty of ideas that I hate, that I don't even want to. I don't even really want them on my planet. But hell, I would still tolerate them to an extent. I don't think they should be fired from their jobs for having those ideas. I don't think they should be disallowed from congregating. That might change when, the idea I hate becomes this massive movement that's trying to take over the planet. Yeah, sure, maybe. But that's a different context. I'm saying in general, my tolerance for them is higher than my level of agreement with them is, right? My level of tolerance does not match the level to which I agree. And that's the whole principle and purpose. It doesn't diverge. It diverges with it quite a bit. My level of tolerance will go down only if the idea gets so much traction that it's actually preventing me from enacting my idea. Yes, then at that point, your level of tolerance and your level of agreement can converge. But until then, they should be slightly separate. The tolerant level has to be slightly higher. So yeah, there's that. But getting into the thing with free speech, why are we dealing with this problem? Why is it such a problem? Why is it such a massive problem that in the world today, you can have horrible consequences that don't shatter, but certainly are like an earthquake hitting your life right in the middle of it, for doing something very relatively small, And why is that, right? And it sickens me how many people have actually defended that idea. It's like, well, you shouldn't have said anything if you thought it was bad. What? You shouldn't have said anything if it could have been interpreted badly. Do you see? I can't even begin to get into the unrealistic nonsense precedent that sets. You have to be on the lookout for every possible way that something you say can be perceived. That's pretty fucking stupid. Try to imagine the number of ways something you say can be perceived. It's essentially, you're taking the side of, there's context and there's perception, and you're taking the side of perception there, is what you're doing. What you're saying is, it doesn't matter what it really is, the way it's perceived is what matters. And I am absolutely, objectively, 100% against that idea. Okay? If it's context versus perception, context should win. In fact, if it's reality versus perception, reality should win. I'm sorry, but it should. In fact, if reality does not win, then if perception wins at all, then perception will cripple the system. Right? This is one of those things that you can't just leave it on, sort of tangled up without doing anything about it. If it's allowed to continue this way, it will end up, at the very least, it'll end up constraining the system. It'll end up pulling the system down. It won't necessarily destroy it, but it'll make it easier for it to be destroyed. It'll cripple society enough. And it's already crippling society as it is. Okay? This is like a really big issue, I think, within the world, and it's one that's not sort of actively talked about, but it's the gap between perception and reality. Okay, I mean, people do talk about this within the context of this free speech thing, but it's even more real than that. The gap between perception and reality is, in a sense, the thing that's responsible for virtually every ethical problem that exists. Every single thing in the system that's unoptimized, every little reason to hate capitalism and to think that it's not good enough and that we need a better world and all that shit. All the shit that's corrupting and twisting and keeping the world down is in some way connected to that gap. Because what's happening is people are perceiving a problem in one way and they're acting as if that's true when it's not actually true, and that's where all the conflict and the violence comes from. It comes from not perceiving the reality of what happened, not being able to perceive, and not being patient enough to figure out what the reality is. So let's take these scenarios where people tweet bad things or say bad things online or do, say very questionable things. And I'll admit, yeah, some of these people did some pretty bad stuff. Like Alex Jones is honestly, half the time he's just a clown character, but the stuff that ended up happening with the Sandy Hook situation was pretty fucked up. I will admit that. Nobody should be arguing against that. Nevertheless, most of the time, it's not really that big of a problem. Okay? So, what I'm saying is, like, give me a real ethical justification for why saying the N-word in a tweet should get you fired. What honest, ethical reason, real reason, could you have to justify something like that? I'm waiting. I want to just stress, because I know that there's people in my audience on the left who are going to say, well, Anton, that's just crazy, right? Don't you want a world without racism? Sure. But a world without racism doesn't mean that racial slurs aren't going to get used. Remember, again, this goes back to that whole difference between perception and reality. A racial slur only has impact if you think that it has impact. It doesn't have impact if you don't think that it does. If the reality of the situation is there's no threat behind the word, then there's no threat in the real world. So a world without racism is perfectly compatible with the idea that, with racial slurs still being around, right? You're not actually creating a world without racism by trying to ban racial slurs from ever being used. You know, this is one of those things that, let me get into the, I'm going to try to lead up to this a bit more carefully. Let me take a step back, okay? There's a general way in which the standards that we hold, like, famous and well-known people to, that I've just never, ever agreed with, that it has never made sense to me. And it's the standard of, and it's not even just, it's not even famous people, it's everyday people. And it's the standard that if a person doesn't say something mean to you, that's perfectly okay. So if they don't say it, but they still feel it, that's totally fine. That's totally excusable. People act as if someone saying something mean to you is worse than them believing the content of that same exact statement, but not saying it. They believe that that's worse. In fact, so much so that they believe that the scenario where it's not said is so much better. And it's not. It's you know, the information you don't have doesn't not matter. It still affects you because it's still in the system, right? Anything that's in, and because it's in the system and the person's operating in the system with that kind of thought in his mind, it's still going to affect the system, right? Let me get, you know, a lot of people who've complained about the free speech thing have said, you know, imagine that all of your thoughts and things you've typed online were posted, you know, were posted for the public to see, but taken out of context. I'm sure, and that you could make anyone look like an evil piece of shit like that. You could. You absolutely could. That's, well, a lot of people have pointed that out, and that's an important point that I'm going to get, and the reason people are making that point is because of this very sort of informational dynamic, is that the information you don't have still matters. It still affects you. It's always bothered me when I've seen people do this in real life. I have seen, like, one person literally, you know, insult another person behind their back, you know, and but when person B finds out about this, they act like it doesn't matter because they never heard it because it didn't happen to their face. It's just like, what? It's amazing. It's so bizarre. It doesn't make any sense. It should still, maybe it's not as bad, but it should still matter to you that they're saying it but hiding it, right? Now, this might sound like I'm saying that it's not okay for people to say, you know, racist words or slurs or whatever, even if they're hiding it. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just pointing out, I'm not even at that point yet, please. What I'm saying is that the gap between, you know, what the information you hear and the information that's there, you know, the information that's there is what actually matters. What you hear doesn't matter as much as what's actually there. Somebody saying stuff like that but not telling you, that actually matters because that's an indication of what how that person thinks and how they operate. And if that's how they operate, that's how they operate within the system, which means that will affect the system and that'll affect you in the system. Because everything in the system is interconnected, right? It's a big deal. Basically, what this dynamic reveals is people have a very, like, people just have like a very weird and misaligned view of information itself, right? They treat somebody saying mean things with an enormous amount of gravitas, and someone not saying those things and keeping them hidden as some sort of virtuous behavior, like it makes any sense. And that doesn't make any sense. It's the other way around, if anything. And the way we treat, famous people or well-known people comes a result of that. They're not allowed to say mean things. They're not allowed to say politically incorrect things. They're all supposed to say and talk in a very sterile, boring way. That's why literally every single Hollywood interview that's ever existed is the most boring thing. Have you ever tried watching one of those things? It's insufferable. They talk about utter nonsense. Utter, absolute nonsense. And that's the standard we hold them to, because they're not allowed to talk about anything interesting or be authentic, because being authentic might mean being a little edgy, and we can't handle that. No, that's too scary for us. Now, the problem is, when you prevent people from saying certain words, they don't actually stop using those words, they just stop using them in the public eye. You're training them to hide what the words they use rather than actually stop using them. You're telling them to sort of hide how they think, and that ends up with this whole thing where people who end up being well known have to basically learn how to put on an act, whenever they go out in public. They can't be themselves. They have to put on an act. They have to, they have to worry about their perception, because you are forcing them to care about how they come across. Their entire character becomes how they come across, and it gets worse and worse until literally their entire identity becomes how they come across and not who they really are. And that's what you get with politicians in Washington, right? They have no real identity behind that. All of that they have is how they come across. And I don't know what that is, except like the end extreme of like sociopathy or narcissism is like all you actually have is the way you come across. So it's pure exchange value, right? There's no use value in there, because it's not about how you really are, it's how you come across. You see how that works? It's not a good precedent for the public to set for, the popular people, the people who are comedians, famous people, politicians, anyone who's in the public eye. You cannot hold them to this standard. You have to allow them to be bad. You have to allow them to be negative. Because if you don't, you're going to get a popular, well-known elite, famous people, an elite of fake fucks that are at the top that make all the decisions and don't give a flying fuck about what reality is. All they will care about is how it comes across. Why do you think the problem within Washington exists the way it does? It exists because all that they worry about is how they come across. It's all about what are the voters going to think. Oh, I have to worry about my voters like this. And again, I know I can already anticipate the argument, but they have to care about how they come across, right? Because they have to, they have to worry about the information they're sending to their constituents and the public, right? Right, they do have to worry about that information, but the responsibility exists on both ends. They have to worry. Their responsibility is to make sure that the information we have about them is a genuine reflection of their character and their plan. And we have to worry that when we interpret the information coming from them, we're aware that there's context to it and it's not always what it seems. We need to be aware of the context. And sometimes it might seem bad, but if you look at the context, it's not actually that bad. Or it's not actually that big of a problem. That's how we should treat people who are more popular. But the standards are incredibly, like, I'm not saying that people who are in positions of power shouldn't be held to a higher standard. No, absolutely they should. Obviously, you don't want them to be criminals. But the problem is, the standard we're talking about here isn't what they do, but how the information itself comes across. Right? You cannot have high standards for how the information comes across. You have to have high standards for what the information itself actually is. Right? You can't, you need to, if it's a politician, you need to care more about the content of what they're saying and what they're interested in than the way it's being delivered to you. If it's being delivered to you in a way that's kind of mean or kind of politically incorrect, that's not that important. And you can't worry about how it comes across, because if you're too worried about how it comes across, then how it comes across becomes the entire game. And that game fucking sucks. And we're living in the result of that now, where normal people are being censored for nothing. And it trickles down. It trickles down to everyday people who don't do things that are that bad. I realize that the whole informational argument here has another side to it. I do. You could always say, well, if I say a racial slur, that has an impact. And that impact matters. Yeah, it does. You're right. I have to worry about that impact. Of course I do. But what if I said it in a way where I didn't think it would ever have impact? Like I said it in privately and then someone records me and then you post that online. Am I at fault now? I hope not. I hope anyone with an ounce of decency in their mind would understand that isn't fair. That's incredibly that is the opposite of justice. Because if I'm saying it privately, I'm never intending it to be public, and I'm not using it. Well, the other condition is it depends. I'm not using it as a way to try to hurt anyone either, right? That second part is rather important. See, here's the thing. When people hear that, actually no. How do I explain this? This is not easy to explain. There's two problems to okay. When you do something bad to someone else, you have an impact on them, and that matters. Sure. It does matter. I admit that. But where does the impact come from? Does the impact come from the act itself or what the act itself indicates? Right? Is it about the value or the real value of the act in and of itself or the expected value? Or is it both? And I'm framing it in those terms because I think if you really think about it, both of those things end up affecting the way we perceive what other people say. So, let's say that I punched you in the face. Now, maybe you're hurt by that, but maybe worse. Maybe you're scared, maybe you're threatened, maybe you're alarmed, maybe your body goes into shock, so on and so forth. There's all kinds of reactions that happen, right? Now, some of those reactions they do come from the inherent value of the act in and of itself, but some of those reactions come from what you think the act indicates. Like, it indicates that I'm going to be violent towards you. Now, let's say there's another scenario where I punch you, but it's a punch that we've agreed I would make. Like, let's say you and I had a conversation, and it would be like, hey, what if I punched you? And for whatever reason, you're like, okay. And you knew that it was coming, like the Fight Club scene or whatever. You know that it's coming. Now, if you know that it's coming, all of that other stuff that might concern you if I punched you by surprise is out of the picture, right? The only thing it still hurts. It still hurts, sure. The pain might still be there. That is inherent to the act. But the expectation's totally different because you don't think that there's a real threat in there. I'm not actually trying to hurt you. I'm not actually going to take it too far. You probably know that unless you're some incredibly paranoid person. But perhaps, in theory, if it's like two friends and they're drunk and for whatever reason you agreed to do the thing, the expectation of more pain isn't there. And because of that, the fear isn't there. And because of that, the impact is actually less, right? That's how it happens. Part of the impact that of certain acts that we experience doesn't come from the act in and of itself, but from what we think the act is going to lead to. So when it comes to racial words, and I think they're a great example of this, is the value of those words is more often than not in the expectation, more so than anything else. I mean, there's two elements to it. One element, there's the pain, and the pain comes because the word historically is a reminder of historical oppression and so on. But the second component is the expectation that that word indicates that you have some sort of reason to be against the group in question. So if I use the N-word, what that means is not only does that remind people who are hurt by the N-word of, unfair things that have been done to their people in the past, but it's also might be an indication to them that I have a problem with my character and that I'm somehow against them. And then that creates the fear. And you see there's that additional thing. There's that additional thing that's present that makes it a problem. Now, there are some people, I'm using this, the N-word example is the greatest example of this, because there are some people that are perfectly okay with white people using the N-word. I mean, there's some people, between friends, there's some people that are cool with it, more or less. There's some cases where it's a term of endearment. This does exist, right? Now, the reason it exists is because in those cases, there's no expectation of any sort of real threat. They know that it's coming from a place of endearment or friendship, or it's someone just busting your balls, but there's no real, like, hot, heavy racism behind it, right? That intention is missing. And because that intention is missing, the threat isn't really there. Do you see how that works? That's why I say in a world without racism, you could still have the operation and use of racial slurs. Because it's just like that. It's in a world where the expectation of any danger is gone, the word won't have any impact. Unless all the people in the world are still very, fragile and hurt by things that have happened in the past. But, time will mend that kind of thing. With enough time, that'll go away as well. At which point, racial slurs won't have any sort of impact anymore. I'm basically saying you could easily have a world where, without racism, where racial slurs are used, because the slurs are not what characterize racism in of itself. Racism is a deeper thing. It's not just the use of a word. It's more complex. It's about a certain number. It's a pattern, right? It's a pattern of, using certain kinds of words and thinking a certain kind of way and believing inherent biases that put certain people down. That's what racism is. It's not the use of the word. The use of the word can easily diverge from that. I'll speak for myself. I will use, I have used racial slurs before. I've used them when I play games, and no one's in the house. And I'll use them because I'm angry and I'm upset at what's happening in the game. And it's a great way to sort of vent and express anger, right? That's how I've used them in the past. And I think that's perfectly healthy. I don't think there's any real problem with that, because it's just a way of expressing anger. And the reason those words, I don't just use those words. I'm not like specifically, but I'm saying the reason those words come out is because those words are sort of an extra level of emotion in them. You can express more anger with them than just the typical word. And I don't use them with people in the games. I'm just explaining, to myself. It's sort of like that whole situation where PewDiePie said the N-word when he was playing PUBG. And it's like, I don't hold that against him personally. I might understand if some, African-American people do, but you see the point. It's like you can't really just hold that against someone, because that isn't enough to think that there's a deeper racist impulse within the person. Or even if there is an impulse, there's no reason to think that impulse is bound to turn into any kind of critical bias or oppression, right? The person, that could be a person that's still perfectly open-minded and willing to accept that, different ethnic groups, were oppressed and shouldn't be oppressed and all that stuff. That person could still be perfectly reasonable, when it comes to real, genuine issues. But in that moment, the word still came out because the impulse is still in there, right? It's still in the mind, right? Even if you don't want to hurt anyone, the impulse to hurt people is still there. It's sort of like the impulse for violence is in there even when nobody actually wants to, hurt people in real life. It works in the same way, and I honestly think that a true post-racist society is a society that, well, again, is a society that'll have to change in two ways. In one way, racial biases will have to disappear. They'll have to sort of dwindle and go away. But the second thing is the negativeness that people have now, the negative impulse, that reaction we have when we think something is racist, that'll also have to disappear. Because, again, that is happening because of the perceived threat. And the perceived threat won't be around, which means the word can be used in, in a sort of, in a way that's constantly, in a context that's constantly safe without ever turning into any kind of real danger or real problem for the people that the implications behind the word actually target. Sorry. So that's how it can work. There's more about this, but of course I'm coming at this from a BLR perspective as well, because you have to see that in order to get a post-racial society, changes have to happen on both ends. On the one end, you need the people who are racist to become more open-minded. On the other end, you need the people who have such a negative reaction towards racism to be less to be less sensitive towards it, because in the ideal world where it doesn't exist, that sensitivity doesn't exist either, right? Because there's no perceived threat. That sensitivity wouldn't be there, rather. People in that world wouldn't be sensitive like that because it wouldn't be a perceived threat. It's like, for example, like, for instance, you know, you can make a joke about the Holocaust to a person who was in the Holocaust while they're in the Holocaust. That's bad, but saying it to a person who's you know, far enough away from that event, that has never experienced that, to them, it's like, oh, okay, this wasn't really... It doesn't really affect them. You can make it, you know, it doesn't impact them as much. They have no reason to really feel the impact. It's sort of like the whole, like, too soon thing. Well, then there's a thing where it's like, it's not too soon, it's too, you know, too far or too long, and at that point, you don't feel as much impact. Of course, then you have another problem, which is people forget the significance of historic events in general, and you don't want to do that either. No, you don't, absolutely. But the point is, the point is that with enough time, the impact stops being there in and of itself, and you have to keep that in mind. And if you want to have a world where that impact doesn't exist, again, there's things that need to be done on both ends. Oof, boy, I'm sweating. Now, again, going back to the whole perception versus reality thing, this doesn't just apply to racism, of course, or anything, but it applies to anything that's politically incorrect. And there's plenty of things that are politically incorrect that aren't racist. Racism is the big banner of political correctness nowadays, but there's plenty of things that aren't, you know, there's plenty of ideas that aren't politically incorrect, that are way worse, by the way, than racism or anything else. There's lots of ideas that are way worse than that. If you really want to go digging for them, you can find them. At least I think. But, you know, those ideas should still have a place to be expressed. And that's the other reason, that's the other issue with trying to censor everything, is that you actually need to have access to the bad ideas in order to understand why they're bad. You can't just have them not exist in the system. They have to be in there. Somebody needs to advocate for them, or at least be able to talk about them without being banned or harassed or fired, in order for those ideas to be accessible and to be understood. And you want them to be accessible. I mean, we're getting kind of beyond the scope of just the free speech problem, but you want virtually every idea that exists to be up for some sort of discussion, because only then is the information always accessible to be, you know, accepted or denied, to add to the progress. Maybe there's a lot of ideas that are very bad, but those bad ideas will still have, you know, extrinsic goods to them. Like, you know, for example, you know, if there's an idea that's really bad, the more you try to disprove it, the stronger you can make your own idea, your good idea. So you need to think about all these things. Of course, yeah, you have a problem if sensitive people, again, going back to my example with somebody says something racist, there's sensitive people who are really upset by that. That's a problem. Yeah, it certainly is. It certainly is. But should the entire system cater to that problem specifically? No. And I'll tell you right off the bat, if I was in a situation where there was someone sensitive, like, right in front of me, and I could tell my words were hurting them, I would fucking stop what I was doing right then and there. Because I don't want to lead to that kind of, I don't want to do that kind of damage. You know, I absolutely don't want to do that kind of damage. But at the same time, yeah, people should be, you know, people should be open and allow one another and allow other people to be negative, and especially people who are well known and famous and popular and so on, because those are the people who lead society in one way or another. And yes, you want them to be good people, but that doesn't mean you want them to always say the right thing. because goodness isn't about saying the right thing or being nice or coming across the right way, right? Coming across, like, again, this is where the gap comes in again, right? There's coming across as good and actually being good, and actually being good is what you care about, but coming across as good, that's not what you care about. And I think political correctness is entirely about that. It's about coming across as good, where the real standards of being good are sort of left by the wayside. That's the issue. Now, of course, you know, I'm not saying that you should be politically incorrect all the time. I'm not being politically incorrect in this video, right? Of course not. But you do. But basically, there's a time and a place. You know, there's a time and a place to do it, and there's a time and a place not to do it. Okay, and there is the point is there is a time and a place to be politically incorrect. And when I say politically incorrect, I mean politically incorrect to the furthest extreme that political incorrectness can go, which is, at this point, someone being racist, truly racist. You even need to have a place in society where that kind of thing is acceptable, because otherwise you drive that underground, and then it never really goes away. Then, well, it depends, but that could turn into an even bigger problem. Now, I've sort of not talked about the whole economic side of this thing. A lot of people have talked about using social media as public utilities and reinterpreting everything as that. And I agree. And I have to talk about complexity again. Sorry, but I have to talk about complexity because that's the leading concept. That's the leading framework that I use for these kinds of things. The idea of an internet bill of rights or internet regulations on these social media company makes so much sense from the framework of complexitism that it's actually funny. Before anyone even said the idea of public utilities, and the first time I heard about the Alex Jones band, the first thing that popped in my head was that social media should just become sort of part of the platform of society, right? It should become, you know, regulated or turned into rights or whatever it is, but it should become integrated with the part of society that sets up a platform, which is the government. It essentially should be more intertwined with government. That was my first impulse, the second I heard about this whole thing, before anyone even said that. Because that's exactly the intuition that complexitism has. The intuition of complexitism is that as we go forward, government will get bigger and bigger, as society gets bigger and bigger. And as new arenas unfold, new platforms have to unfold. And hence the systems that emerge in the new arenas will have to become regulated as in order for those new arenas to actually grow. If they don't become regulated, those arenas won't grow, they'll crumble, and everything will become more and more problematic. If you don't regulate social media, then you're going to get shitty social media companies. And then that's going to force... And then somebody else has to come along and make new ones. And I'm going to get to that in a minute. But the point is, generally, the way that the system progresses is that, you know, the market constantly shifts, but the platform also constantly shifts. The part of the system that's not market, the part of the system that's, you know, giving everyone a platform to participate in the market. This is where the whole left-wing argument for free healthcare comes in. They're saying healthcare should be part of the platform. Well, then social media should also be part of the platform, and internet should also be part of the platform. Why? Because the purpose of the platform is to confine where the competition should be happening. And why do you want to confine where competition should be happening? Because there's no point in competing over everything. Because not everything is worth competing over. Because if you're always competing for... Because basically, not all forms of... some forms of competition are mutually exclusive. That's why. Right? Some low forms of competition exclude us the ability of competing at a higher level. If we're constantly trying to compete over healthcare and the ability to afford food and you know, all that shit, then higher levels of competition can't be achieved. That's the idea of complexitism. That's why you want to introduce a platform to help get to the next level. The internet is the next level, and for a while there weren't many regulations, and it worked okay, but then it started to turn into a problem because that's usually what happens when people, you know, we start to figure it out. And now the only way to get to the next level is to you know, to fix the platform in a healthy way, to make sure that it doesn't become unhealthy, and then the competition will move on. So I am 100% in favor of the government intervention argument when it comes to the internet. Completely 100% in favor. The arguments I've heard from some people I know, as well as libertarians, is they'll say, well, no, just let the market figure it out. Good Lord. Let the market figure it out. Yep. Yeah, of course. Why was I even hoping that people would be singing a different tune at this point? Let the damn market figure it out. Look, it doesn't make sense to me to just let the market figure out everything. It just doesn't make sense to me. Some things feel completely worthless. Like, I've seen all of these alternate media sites compared to YouTube and Facebook, and I might certainly end up using some of them, but to be completely honest, I don't want to use any of them because they don't do anything differently. They're the same. Like, I'm not saying they don't do anything differently. Obviously, they don't have the same censorship, problem. But my point is, fundamentally, they aren't different in any way. They offer the exact same functionality, the exact same process, the exact same use value. I don't feel like anything new is really being created in that process. It's more like the existing value depreciated, and then we have to go and rely on the market to, create new value rather than renovating the thing that exists, which you can do if you can renovate it, and we can renovate it. Right? It's just a matter of regulating the social media site, or again, Internet Bill of Rights, etc. And that's a lot easier to do than constantly having to rely on some entrepreneur coming along and inventing the next fucking Facebook. Okay? And it's annoying to have to move from one thing to the other. Right? It's not like they're different. Yes, I have to close down your Facebook account and move on to new Facebook. It's like, why is that process in any way something that process feels useless to me, right? In my mind, Facebook is already doing its job, and functionally speaking, it's pretty much perfect at what it does. All of these sites are perfect at what they do, right? Except for the censorship thing. So just cut away the censorship and let them be the way they are, and let that go on as long as you can. Like, it's not like we, it's like when a road crumbles, we repair the road. You don't, go use a different road on the other side of the planet or something, And it's harder to do the more impact the thing has, obviously. Or it's like, when the sewage system in the city starts having some problems, you repair the sewage system. You don't try to build a new one out of, right next to it. And then have everybody move from one city to the next to live with that new sewage system. It doesn't make any goddamn sense. Like, the amount of effort everybody would have to go through to move on to the new sites is more than the amount of effort it would take to actually just renovate the existing ones by getting rid of the censorship problem. Far more. Now you could say, oh, it's not a lot, you just have to sign up for an account. Sure, you have to sign up for an account, but that's, again, it's more work globally speaking, because it's not just you, it's every single person who's using the existing sites, creating a new account, and moving all of that over. It's like, yeah, it's doable. It's obviously doable, but it feels totally pointless to me. It's one of those situations where it's just pure exchange value. No new use value is actually being created, because those new sites offer the same exact functionality as the existing sites. I would still, by the way, I'm still okay with those new sites existing. But the whole thing is what you want to encourage is creativity from the market, right? You want new sites to offer something the old ones didn't. You don't want them to just do the same thing. You don't want them to have the exact same function that old sites did, just so that we wouldn't have to deal with the oligarchs or the authoritarian problems of the old sites. No, that's not what you want. You want the new sites to be not completely new, but new enough that there's actually added creative elements. As I see it, the people who are taking advantage of these new sites, one, yes, they're frustrated with censorship, but two, they're honestly just taking advantage because they expect the Silicon Valley bubble to burst. And that to me, again, as someone who is use value driven, I'd say that to me doesn't sound like use value. That sounds like pure and utter exchange value nonsense. And I don't know why anyone's obsessed with it. It's pure. Again, it comes down. Again, the difference between pure use value and exchange value is the same thing I mentioned: reality and perception. And this is perception. The only reason these new sites have to exist is because there's a problem with the old ones. But that process of going from old to new, in this particular case, doesn't create new value. It doesn't create new value. It's more like it's making up for something that the system is lacking rather than adding something new to the system. And that is fundamentally the reason why I'm in favor of the more left-wing solution when it comes to the, regulating social media sites and so on. So that's what I have to say about that. Hopefully all of that made sense. And yes, I do really encourage anyone to rethink this whole reality versus perception thing, because there's just no real reason, there's no good enough reason why we have to interpret every mean thing that some famous person says like it's a big enough problem. And then that person gets fired. And the funny thing is, most people probably aren't even asking those people to get fired. Like Valerie Jarrett getting fired, most people probably don't even care if they get fired. They're like, oh, this person sucks. This person's a bitch. And it's the companies that are actually making the decision to fire them because they're afraid of what's going to happen to their market now. It's more like it's more like the companies are taking advantage of the situation, or because they think they're going to have to deal with a huge disadvantage, which is also a problem. But I think part of the problem is definitely the way that the public is holding the people in power accountable. Is that the way the public is trying to hold people in the public eye accountable right now is by forcing them to taking that accountability for how they come across, not forcing them to take accountability for what they actually stand for and are. And that is where all of this is coming from. And yeah, that needs to stop. And I think the whole post-racism world where basically racist language still exists, I think that is something that's something I might actually do a possible world episode on. Anyway, cheers.